Hey everyone, this is Aaron. Welcome to another Commander Deck Tech. The commander we're going to be talking about today is going to be Zangief, the Red Cyclone. Zangief's kind of got a lot going on, but it's a really fun card, my favorite from the Secret Lair Street Fighter series for sure. So Zangief, the Red Cyclone, must be blocked if able. As long as it's your turn, Zangief is indestructible. There's a lot of cool ways to take advantage of that. And spinning Piledriver, whenever Zangief deals damage to a creature, if that creature was dealt excess damage this turn, that creature's controller sacrifices a non-creature, non-land permanent. So whenever you kill something, you throw it into some sort of environmental thing. That's the flavor. It's hitting the wall or whatever. And this deck's really good. It's really good at keeping people down, policing the board, getting rid of artifacts and enchantments that are problematic, and there's a lot of ways to abuse that. So we're going to go through the deck here. So let's start with our ramp package here. So we have Sol Ring. We all know what that does. We have Arcane Signet, fixing our mana. Ignoble Hierarch. It had Exalted. So Exalted means you get +1/+1 when you attack alone. And that's pretty good for a commander that's all about turning sideways. Birds of Paradise. Nature's Lore. Search your library for a forest. Farseek. Just kind of really basic mana fixings. We have a lot of the recognizable green mana ramp cards, Kodama's Reach, and then Cultivate. So what we have next here is our card draw package. Is very attacking centric, and there's a couple of staples that you'll likely see in these colors here. So you have Tusky Bearer's Secrets. Can't be countered, it's indestructible, it attacks each turn if able, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So the fun synergy with Zangief is Zangief has to be blocked. So the amount of times you can sneak Tusky in there is pretty high. I've been able to absolutely sneak Tusky in there. Death Reap Ritual. So it has Morbid. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. So the thing with Zangief is that it has to be blocked. A lot of creatures are going to be dying. And if you have Zangief on the board, you're almost always going to be getting a card off of this. And even when people have sacrifice strategies or anything else going on, make sure you're paying attention during other people's turns, because you can also make sure that you can get your cards. Because it is a May ability, so if you miss your trigger, then that's on you. Phyrexian Arena, if at the beginning of your upkeep you draw a card, lose 1 life. Just pretty basic ways to draw cards here. So Orin, Frostfang. Attacking creatures you control have Death Touch, so you want Zangief to have Death Touch. And there's a lot of cards that turns Death Touch on for Zangief. Just to, a 7/4 can't kill everything. There's an Dragon or something like that you need to plow through. He may be indestructible, give him Death Touch, and you get a lot of fun interactions with that, and making sure things die, and making the Zangief attack as problematic as possible, because this deck lives and dies by the combat stat. But also, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to the player, draw a card. So if you're able to get through, you get a card. Nearth of the Dire Hunt. So this is a fun one. Whenever one or more creatures you control fight or become blocked, draw a card. And Zangief has the text on it, this creature must be blocked. So you're guaranteed to get a card anytime you attack with Zangief and there's a creature on the board. You're going to get a card back. It has another ability. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 2 and a Gruul, and if you do, double target creature's power until end of turn, so make the creature bigger. And that creature must be blocked. So it already says that on Zangief, but being able to double your power for 3 mana is pretty good and help you get over those big things that particularly can't be, you can't just stomp out with a 7/4. We have Fight Rigging. It has Hideaway 5. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Then if you control a creature with power 7 or greater, you may play the exile card without paying its mana cost. So mostly you're just getting a 1/1 counter off of this. You get the Hideaway once. It's not the best card in this deck, but it seems pretty good, and I like to have an engine just to keep Zangief big and make sure I can keep attacking. Jeska's Will. If you want to control your commander and you're in the colors of red, you definitely want Jeska's Will. Choose one. If you control your commander as you cast this, you may choose both. Add red for each card in target opponent's hand and exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them. Just have an explosive turn. Not really a lot of combo synergies with it, but you can have some big turns with this. Infiltration Lens is a fun card in this deck. Whenever a creature becomes blocked by whenever equipped creature becomes blocked by a creature, you may draw 2 cards. So Zangief must be blocked. It's 1 mana, 1 to equip. That's it, and you get 2 cards for just turning Zangief sideways. insanely scary card in this deck. Rishkar's Expertise, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Your commander right out of the gate is a 7/4. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So there's a lot of cards. This deck curves on the low end. So just be able to cast something that costs 5, draw 7 cards. One of the best, if you have a stompy deck, always one of the best draw spells here. Morbid Opportunists, whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once a turn, so this is another one of those really good cards where Zangief's almost always going to be attacking and something's always going to be dying. 7/4, like there's 3 other people. Finding something to kill with a 7/4 that's indestructible, pretty easy. And then people will, it may be blocked, but they can select the blockers, so the amount of people will be like, oh, I'll just chump with a token, and you can just get a card. This also triggers during other people's turns. So Viridian Rebel, I've seen a lot of controversy about this card. Whenever an artifact is put into an opponent's graveyard from the battlefield, you may draw a card. So it's a real good piece for anti-play against treasures and other artifacts like that. But it's also in here because Zangief has the text on his card where target opponent has to sacrifice a non-creature, non-land card. So the odds of it being a dumb token that's a clue or a treasure or anything like that just to fulfill that need is really high, and you can get a lot of cards off of this. And also, you can point Zangief as someone if they only have a soul ring and force them to sacrifice their soul ring, and then you draw a card off of their busted soul ring. Pretty good card in this deck. So one of my favorite cards, Daryl, Hunter of Walkers. I know a lot of people about the Walking Dead cards, but this one's fun. At the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent creates 3 Walker tokens. Those are just 2/2 zombies. And when you tap Daryl, he deals 2 damage to target creature, and then whenever a zombie an opponent controls dies, draw a card. So, this card just always goes nuts for me. You can make political deals to give someone some zombies if they're having bad luck. You're like, you know what, you want some zombies? I'm just going to kill one. Or you can give the zombies to someone. Zangief must be blocked, and the odds of someone saying, hey, you put someone in a position where it's like, do I want to keep this zombie? Do I want to block with one of my real creatures? Or do I want to give him a card or deny him a card by blocking with something that's mine? And then Daryl can just, you can tap him and just ping a zombie or do 2 damage. 2 damage is super relevant. I had one game where someone was playing Kali of the Vast, and I'm just sitting there constantly just shooting Kali, and they could not keep it on the board at all. Really good card. One of my favorite cards for sure. So the next card we have is Colony Ambush. So there's a lot of fight spells, not too many fight spells, but there's a decent amount of fight spells in this. And it's also a land. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. And the fun thing about fight spells is you don't need to be in combat to trigger Zangief's ability to sacrifice the non-land, non-creature card. So you can do that outside of combat with fight spells. So there's a couple in there to keep that on. Here's another fight spell, Master's Rebuke. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker. This also hits planeswalkers. It's instant. This is just kind of a pet card from Standard. I do that a lot in my decks because a lot of cards I play in Standard, I just like to have them because they seem fun. Uvenwald Tracker is a repeatable fight spell. It's a 1 mana drop, and you just 1 in a green, target creature you control fights another target creature. So if you need to fight something on demand, if you need to fight something on someone else's turn, or if you want to make the combat step weird, you can do that. Prize Fight, target creature you control fights creature you don't control, and you get to create a treasure token. So you're ramping, you're also fighting, you're removing stuff. And Ancient Animus, also instant. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, and if it's legendary, so you get to pump Zangief. Then it fights a target creature an opponent controls. So again, just being able to fight stuff. So there's some board wipes in here, and a lot of them all of them take advantage of Zangief being indestructible on your turn. So a lot of them are sorcery speed, and a lot of them are they're put in here intentionally to be as one-sided as possible. So Blasphemous Act, you get to do 13 damage to each creature, and Zangief's indestructible, so anything that hits him, he's not going to die if you do this on your turn, and then all of a sudden the board's open and you can go in, hit someone for however much. You have Assassin's Trophy, which is pretty standard removal Damnation, so destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Destroying things doesn't matter when it's your turn, if Zangief's on the field. Chandra's Ignition. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each other opponent. So this card is interesting in Zangief's, in the Zangief deck here. Specifically because this can trigger like a whole bunch of instances of the sacrifice clause for non-creature, non-land. So you can blow enchantments out with this. These two just synergize together like crazy. But just be careful, because you can absolutely be ready to lose your own enchantments and your own stuff if you're nuking your own board, but you're mostly going to come out ahead on this. Chaos Warp, you got to deal with the pesky stuff sometimes. No ways around it. Inscription of Abundance is another fight spell at instant speed, but it has a kicker. You can put counters, you can gain life, and you can fight things. It's pretty flexible, and most of the time I'm casting it for the full cost with the kicker and getting all of those things. Again, another card in Standard that I'm quite a fan of. Beast Within, just destroy any target permanent, give them a 3/3. So now we have our protection suite. So we gotta make sure we protect our commander as much as possible. So we have Swiftfoot Boots. Target creature has hexproof and haste. I don't have Lightning Greaves in here because you don't want to give your commander Shroud. You don't want to give him Shroud because you want to be able to make sure you can target him as well for all those fight spells in there. You don't want those fight spells being dead in hand. Deflecting Swat, like if you're red and your commander's super important, then you need Deflecting Swat. It sucks because it's super expensive as a card, but you know, you got to be able to protect them from single target threats. Bolt Bend is Deflecting Swat. We got Deflecting Swat at home. Change the target of a spell or ability. Change the target of a target spell ability with a single target, and it costs 3 less it costs 3 less to cast if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, and Zangief's a 7/4, so this is always going to be online. It's always going to be 1 mana. I had an interaction where I had both of these in my hand at the same time, and someone's like, oh, I was ready for the Deflecting Swat, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to use the poor man's Deflecting Swat, and I'm really going to dodge that damage. Heroic Intervention. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, so pretty good, protecting your own stuff. And you can also combo this with you know, if you have Zangief on board and you don't want to lose your stuff to your own Blasphemous Act trigger, then just Heroic Intervention. So another way of giving Zangief some protection and also giving him Death Touch. So other tapped creatures you control have Death Touch, so the moment Zangief goes to attack, it has Death Touch. You can also pay 1 to untap it, so there's a fun interaction with this where if your creature is tapped and they're like, oh, I'm going to target it with a kill spell, then you can just pay the 1, tap Seraph, and then untap, and then add the hexproof on top of the stack, and then make the spell dissolve. So a lot of cool stuff you can do. So now we have our haste package. We have Halana and Elena, partners. First strike, reach, and at the beginning of combat turn, on your turn, put X 1/1 counters on another target creature control where X is their power, and it gains haste until end of turn. So there's a lot of cards that give haste because, you know, you want to be as effective with Zangief as possible. You want to go straight to attacking. It's pretty hard to untap with creatures, especially in a 4-player game, especially with something as what am I trying to say here? As bully-centric as Zangief can be. And then we have Xenagos, God of Revels, so just double Zangief's power, give him haste, comes in just absolutely devastating card. And we have Urbrask the Hidden. Creatures you control have haste. I like this card because it slows people down. A lot of people just sometimes towards the end of the game, they just want to get blockers up there. And then they come in tapped, and all your stuff has haste. And if, let's say, Zangief dies and you just got to recast him, Urbrask is there, you just come right back with haste. All their stuff is getting tapped down. Rhythm of the Wild. So this is an important one. Creature spells you control can't be countered, and then it has Riot. You can give them the 1/1 counter or give them haste, and most of the time, unless you have another haste giving effect or creature doesn't have haste already, just, you know, you're going to go with haste or give them the counter. Fires of Yavimaya. Creatures you control have haste. It has the sacrifice clause, and I've used that to like kill people in very, very tight moments, or to dodge toxic deluges and stuff. People forget about the +1/+1 sacrifice clause on this. I'm a firm believer of any deck with black in it wants Animate Dead, because there's always going to be a good target for Animate Dead. And your commander's a target. There's creatures on the other board. This is like in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! This is like a monster reborn, and I absolutely love Anime Dead as a pet card. I'd put it in every deck that has black in it. Now we have our tutor package, and kind of the expected suspects in these colors. We have Demonic Tutor, so 2 mana, go get a card. We have Vampiric Tutor, so go get a card, but instant speed, and Scheming Cemetery. And I know a lot of people don't like this and they want to spend 500 whatever on an Imp Seal. That's fine, you do you. I always like the political aspect of Scheming Cemetery, because Symmetry I can't read, but you can always just kind of, you know, tell someone like, hey, you want to make a deal with you? You want a card? I'm gonna go get a card. And there's a lot of ways to get the card instantly in this deck as well. I've said this before, but if my deck is green and my commander is a human, I will have Kogla, Titanate, scoop him up, put him back in my hand. One of my favorite cards. Atali, Primal Storm, backup commander card, so if my commander's offline, or people dump all their removal on my card and I have Atali, there's a lot of haste in this deck, there's a lot of fight spells, there's a lot of really good enablers. Atali can just hit the board and just do its own thing and be a threat on its own. I'm a firm believer in having cards that kind of stand on their own and they're threatening on their own, that don't necessarily have to have synergy with your commander specifically. And next batch of cards we have is extra combat. So in a turn sideways deck, you'll only normally turn sideways once a turn. You want to make sure that you turn sideways as many times as you possibly can. So we have Karlach, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Fury of Avernus, new card from the newest set. Whenever you attack, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap all attacking creatures. They gain first strike until end of turn, and after this phase there's an additional combat phase, so you get another combat. We have round 2, untap target creature. After this main phase there's another additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase, and it has flashbacks, so you can do it again. We have Port Razer. When Port Razer deals combat damage to a player, untap each creature. After this combat phase there's an additional combat phase, and it can't attack if it already attacked this turn. There's no combo pieces, there's no kiki-jiki with this or anything like that, but it's mostly here just to get extra combats, and specifically controlling the combat step with Zangief, because Zangief must be blocked. If someone has just one creature, and you can absolutely get around that, and it's pretty easy to connect with this dude, especially because people are afraid of the 7/4 and commander damage, or however big Zangief may be. So we have Scourge of the Thrones. It has a dethrone, which is a trigger where you have to attack the player with the highest health, and then you get another combat step, and then the dragon gets bigger. You can only do it once a turn, but more combats. It's flying, it has evasion. One of my favorite cards in this deck, Karazakar, the Eye Tyrant. Whenever you attack a player, tap target creature that player controls and goad it. So you get to, when you swing at someone with Zangief, you get to tap something, so you're manipulating the combat step a little more. Zangief must be blocked, so if they have 2 things and there's one thing you want particularly dead, then tap the thing that you don't like, or maybe tap it and send it somewhere else. You can redirect other people's threats. If there's Eldrazi on the board and you can't really beat through it, then send it somewhere else. It ain't your problem. So we have Falthus, Shadowcat Familiar. Commanders you control have Menace and Death Touch. Menace is nasty on Zangief because he must be blocked, and the odds of killing something with Zangief when it's a 7/4 and killing 2 things and then having to resolve his combat trigger twice is pretty nasty. And then he also has Death Touch, so those 2 things are absolutely dying. So Basilisk Caller, pretty standard card. Equipped creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. You're probably going to get beat up a lot playing a turn sideways deck, so just keeping you in there. Brash Taunter is a fun one, because whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent, and for 3, and you can tap Brash Taunter, you can fight another target creature, so you can send that 7 damage around in a weird way, so you can do it to an opponent directly. So sometimes, you can't always just turn sideways and break through a board if they have a really massive board. So there's ways to get around that in the combats phase. Fiendlash is another one. Whenever equipped creature is dealt damage, it deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker. So that's another way of getting around combat, getting extra damage as much as possible. Mage Slayer is another one of those cards. When equipped creature attacks, it deals damage equal to its power to defending players. So just turn them sideways, fling that damage to the defending player, and then they have to forced to block it, and it's just chaos in the step. Toralf is a fun card because it has whenever a creature or opponent is dealt excess non-combat damage, Toralf deals damage equal to that excess to any other target other than that permanent. So you're not doing it through the specific combat, but with a lot of the redirect spells and things like that, and a lot of the fight spells and things like that, because that's non-combat damage, you get to point the excess damage somewhere else. And you also get to, like, this and Blasphemous Act as a win condition that you can just absolutely end the game right there if there's enough creatures on board and just pointing it all around. And then on top of that, Zangief has Indestructible, so if you're doing that on your turn and Zangief is out, then, you know, if it doesn't close out the game, then it'll absolutely bring you that much closer to it. So this is probably the nastiest card in the deck, Tergrid, God of Fright. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So whenever you're making them sacrifice the non-land, non-creature permanent off of Zangief's trigger, now you're stealing that thing. So you're just like, hey, I'm going to smash you into your soul ring. I'm also going to steal your soul ring while I'm at it. It's actually a pretty mean interaction. Probably the meanest thing. When I'm rule zeroing this deck, I kind of say, hey, I have Tergrid in here. I could just start stealing crap. And I have like 3 combats in a row, and I'm just going to steal your whole board. So we have a couple of lands. I know I said lands bring me no joy, but a couple of interesting lands in this deck to synergize with our commander. So we have Forbidden Orchid, and you can tap it for 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and when you tap it, target opponent creates a 1/1 spirit creature token. So one thing I saw in a lot of games people doing is that they don't want to deal with Zangief's trigger, so they'll hold mana up and have no blockers because they don't want to lose their enchantments, they don't want to lose their planeswalkers, they don't want to lose their artifacts, and if they don't have a blocker, give them one, force them to block. So we have Arena. This is a fight spell stapled onto a land. Tap target creature you control and target creature of an opponent's choice he or she controls. Each of those creatures deal damage equal to its power to the other. So you get to fight them. That's a Zangief trigger. There's a lot of repeatable fight spells in here, and you get to police the board pretty heavily. So Urza's Saga, we all know what this card does. It has a bunch of steps, but the big important one is that you get to search your library for an artifact card with mana cost 0 or 1. And Infiltration Scope is a 1 mana card, and that's almost always the card I get. You can always get a Soul Ring or anything else like that, but Infiltration Scope is going to get you cards. We have Seiju, which is a channel land. You just blow up and blow something up for 1 mana. And then you have Command Beacon, because your commander is important, and you want to get your commander back. And that's about it for this deck. It's been pretty good. The combat steps are really long and complicated, but it's mostly a brain-dead deck where you just turn them sideways and just watch the havoc go. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this deck tech. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments. I got any interactions wrong, go on ahead and follow me on social media, deck tech and all that, and is going to be in the comments. And subscribe, comment. I appreciate it. Thank you guys. You all have a good day.